Welcome to One Bills Lite, the instant coffee version of our daily show, One Bills Live. In this week's episode, we discuss the Bills' offensive line and whether it will look identical to that of 2020. Hall of Famer Bill Polian joins us to discuss the Bills, and Hall of Fame coach Marv Levy, who's up for another Hall of Fame north of the border. And we also have our one burning question: what will the Bills' offseason program look like come the start date of April 19th? Where's my kicking tee?
And it's Steve Tasker who has been all over the field.
Kind of unique. He was kind of a dual role player for you. Steve!
A balloon.
Steve! A blimp? We're not even in the stratosphere of normalcy here. Thanks for joining us here on One Bills Lite. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills insider Chris Brown here with you. And the Bills have made a statement, Steve, with their offseason dealings concerning their offensive line by re-signing John Feliciano, Darrell Williams, tendering a qualifying offer to restricted free agent Ike Butker. They've essentially said, we believe in the linemen we had last season to get the job done for us again this season. Do you agree with that based on the signings we saw?
I think I do. Here's why. Certainly you want to get better up front, and we've talked a lot about how, for me even, not just normal, I think the running game starts up front. And if there was a problem with the Bills' offense, or at least something that was deficient or something that we'd like to improve, it was the running game from last year. And I like a lot of people, think, you start up front. If the offensive line are pushing people around, your running game's going to go. Now, in pass pro, who can, what are you going to – you can't cast aspersions on this offensive line for the passing game they had last year. Josh had a breakout year.
They did a nice job.
They did a really nice job. I think Darrell Williams was an absolute home run. They did not know he was going to play as well as he did when they signed him to a one-year deal last year. Bringing him back, bringing Feliciano back. You got Mitch Morse entrenched. Cody Ford will return. This is an offensive line that never got the same five guys on the field last year. Never. 3 snaps. They a third or two-thirds of the way through the season, 3 snaps. So they'd like to see what these guys can do together. Certainly the depth, maybe they'll bring some different faces in. Mm-hmm. But these guys earned it. Let them come back and have another shot at it this year. Certainly if you want your running game to improve, you can work harder on it, be more committed to it, maybe give them a few more early reps in games to see if they can get a rhythm going. But I have absolutely no problem with bringing these guys back. They earned it, give them the chance to improve on what they did last year.
And I know we've discussed on our daily show, One Bills Live, about the likelihood of them drafting an offensive lineman somewhere in the first 2 days of the draft. We talked about how they probably have their starting tackles entrenched for the foreseeable future now that Darrell Williams is back on a 3-year deal and Deion Dawkins was just signed to an extension last year. But I could see them drafting an offensive tackle early in the draft, somewhere in the first 2 days, to groom that player to be the swing tackle out of the gate, or at least compete for the swing tackle job, and potentially move into the starting lineup when maybe that Darrell Williams contract is up in 3 years' time. So grooming for the future. And then I wouldn't be surprised, even on day 3, you draft a guard center type and you add pieces that way. I could envision that still happening in the draft. This despite the new addition, the only new addition to this point to the offensive line room, Steve, made this week in free agent Bobby Hart, former starting right tackle in Cincinnati. He figures to compete for the swing tackle role with the Bills, presumably, as I said, with a draft choice, maybe even an undrafted rookie. We can't forget the Adams kid from Washington, the undrafted rookie who is still on the roster right now.
Trey Adams,
Yeah. So would you agree that the only thing that could change the anticipated look of the starting offensive line in 2021 is a high draft choice at tackle or guard?
That's right. If somehow, some way somebody falls down to number 30, that guy comes in. And even if they do that at number 30, there's no guarantee he can get on the field. They'll
Correct.
Make him earn it. I think the best you can spin Bobby Hart at this point in time, the right tackle for the Bengals last year, they were a horrific offensive line. They're refurbishing their offensive line. Bobby Hart got kicked to the curb by the Cincinnati Bengals, who struggled last year. The only way you can spin that into a change would be if Bobby Hart, through a new scenario, different coaching, different environment, all of a sudden he begins to thrive. Maybe he turns into something other than a guy who struggled last year. at right tackle. Or maybe he comes in and turns into a really good guard for you.
Yeah.
Or something of that nature. But that's where Bobby Hart is in his career. Good guy, athletic. He's got all that going for him. But they struggled at offensive line last year in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They're refurbishing it, and now he's getting a chance to come in on another team. That's where he's at. I have a hard time seeing that right away or even early on. But that's out there. And that's, so if they do pick a guy at 30, either a tackle or a guard, they got their work cut out for them, because I still think the Bills are really curious to see these 5 guys they thought they were going to have at the beginning of the year until John Feliciano pulled his pec muscle and then Cody Ford blew his knee. They never had those guys.
Yeah.
So I think that's where they'd like to start from at the beginning of this year and then evolve from there with guys that they have sprinkled in.
And I don't mean to be negative about the Bobby Hart addition when I say this. Poor guy just signed earlier this week. He's probably all excited to be in Buffalo on a winning team, winning organization. They've probably told him, hey, we'll help you be the best version of yourself, and I'm sure they will make every effort to do that. But if they draft an offensive tackle relatively early in this draft coming up, I don't even know that it's a lock that Bobby Hart's on the roster.
That's right.
I mean, he's going to be facing some stiff competition to be the swing tackle on this roster, maybe even tackle guard type. So, I think Bobby Hart is good insurance, but I don't know that he's going to be the definitive insurance policy come September. This is going to be a competitive situation if they draft somebody early, and I don't know that he's a lock to be here necessarily.
Brandon Beane never says, hey, that's good enough, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be adding as many players as they can, quality players as they can, to that group. Bobby Hart's one of them. And they're expecting Ryan Bates to come in. Ike Butker's coming back. You've got guys who are seeing this as, listen, I got to get on the field.
Mm-hmm.
It's time, like Ike Butker, Ryan Bates. It's for those guys. Right now this season they've got to be thinking, okay, this is my shot. I'm going to get on this team and I'm going to get on the field for these guys and I'm going to play. This is their time. If they're going to be good enough, and now that they're young enough, those guys I'm talking about, this is their time to develop into a starting quality player and to prove themselves on a really good football team.
So we've established that Buffalo's coaching staff with these moves, and the front office for that matter, believes that so long as this line has better luck with their health and availability, they will probably stay largely the same. The next question is, will they be better in 2021? I kind of think if they are healthy, they should be better, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think they should be better. Cody Ford,
even with the schedule, because it's
yes,
a tough schedule.
It is. Listen, it's no tougher than last year's. Looking back and what we thought we were going to face last year, the NFC West, and Pittsburgh and we end up playing Baltimore in the playoffs. But that was a tough schedule last year, really tough schedule, and from this end of it. So that doesn't scare me very much. But yeah. I think they feel like if these 5 guys get in there, get healthy, get to the season healthy, Cody Ford coming back now, his recovery is paramount. He's got to get it, but he's a body that can move people. Feliciano is a guy that can move people. Mitch Morse is a guy that's going to get them lined up and get a hat on a hat. And those tackles overachieved last year. Darrell Williams in particular. So they've got to feel like they're going to be a much better unit going forward, because they're going to finally get to a point where they were trying to improve to get to last year, and they may get it there in week 1. All these guys are going to have a year in the system under their belt, and more than that, really, in most cases. So, yeah, I think they have every reason to believe this group is going to improve going forward.
Because looking at that schedule, I think there are going to be some battles for that offensive line this season. We know the Kansas City Chiefs just added Jaron Reed from Seattle, a really good defensive lineman to pair with Chris Jones up front, and Frank Clark. Hello. And then Tampa Bay, we saw what that defensive front did. They're all back because they just re-signed Shaq Barrett and Ndamukong Suh. So that team's a load up front. There are going to be some challenges, as there is every season. But yeah, I agree. I think if they're healthy and can be readily available, which was simply not the case last year, they should be better. Okay, for the numbers game this week, Steve, we continue to delve into the play of the line of scrimmage, as I need you to tell me the teams you felt ranked in the top 10 in sack differential in 2020. Basically, the teams that registered a good amount of sacks and didn't give up too many on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So a good plus number in sack differential. Your job is to give me at least 5 of those 10 teams from the 2020 season. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, so I need 5 of the 10. I'm only asking for half of these.
Put the music on, thank you. Here we go. I'm going to say Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, number 1 in the league. 56 sacks, 14 allowed, plus 42. Steve, I'm going to tell you, it led the league by a wide margin.
I'll say Baltimore.
Baltimore not on the list.
Arizona.
Arizona is tied for 5th. They are 48 sacks, 29 against for a plus 19. So you're 2 for 3.
Okay, now it's getting hard. Buffalo.
Buffalo made the list. They were 9th, Steve. This is why we're doing this. 38 sacks, 27 against. They were plus 11 in an injury-riddled season for that offensive line, throwing as much as they did. I thought that's a pretty good showing for them.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I'm going down the list. I'm looking at quarterbacks rather than offensive line, and plus I'm getting some Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay was 3rd in the league
I got 4
in
already.
sack differential. You do 48 sacks defensively, and then they were sacked. Brady was sacked 22 times, plus 26. Good for 3rd best in the league.
Forgive me, I'm not even listening to you right now.
That's okay.
Trying to think down the list.
I'm here for the audience. I'm not
Right.
here for you.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Same here, bro. Okay, how about Kansas City?
Kansas City not on the list, sir.
Really?
Yeah.
That's my first miss.
I was a little surprised.
That's my second miss.
I was a little surprised by that one. I think you are on the right track in thinking about quarterbacks that don't take too many, and then you need a defense that's at least decent at getting sacks.
The San Diego LA Chargers.
What are we, 3 years removed from the move from San Diego to LA, and we're still calling you got to work on that motor memory there. You got to
LA Chargers.
Recalibrate. That is incorrect after all of that. So you only need 1 more here, and you've got 6 to choose from.
What are the numbers I have gotten? I got number 1. I got
You got
tied
number
for
1,
5,
number 3,
number 5.
number 5, and number 9.
Okay, I'm going to say. Oh, I'll say New England.
New England not on the list, sir. Did not make this list. So if you're having trouble finding a quarterback, I would say find a defense that racked
you.
up sacks.
Tennessee.
Tennessee not on the list, sir.
Golly. Oh. Indianapolis.
Indianapolis tied with Arizona
Thank you.
for 5th. 40 sacks.
I should have known
Only
that.
21 against, plus 19. Yeah, Phillip didn't take too many.
Right. I was thinking maybe get athletic quarterbacks and that kind of thing, but then
Not always
it should be
athletic.
the other way. It should be like the guys who don't move
Guys
around.
that get it
Ben
out.
Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers. And the other one I'd say is Drew Brees.
New Orleans is on the list. They are
Right.
7th.
Yeah.
They were a plus
I had that-
16. Here
I
are the
had
other
that.
ones that you did not guess, okay? Number 2 in the league, LA Rams, plus 28. Okay, they're a good sack team. They had 53 sacks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Green Bay, 41 sacks, 21 against. I think they're an underrated defense in terms of pass rush with the 2 guys they've got up there. And then Cleveland, number 8, plus 12. And Denver, plus 10.
Really?
Without Von Miller all year. How about that?
And Drew Lock taking snaps.
Well, right. And that guy wasn't making a whole lot of good decisions.
Didn't we lump him up? I remember the Trey White
Yes, his
fumble
biggest problem was giving the ball away,
Yeah, I guess that's
not
it's the
necessarily
same.
taking sacks.
not the same.
He did take 32 sacks last year. Let's not mince words.
Yeah.
But yeah. So well done there, Steve. Pretty good
right.
work.
I can live with that.
Yeah. Time now for our interview with Hall of Famer Bill Polian, the 6-time NFL Executive of the Year. Sat down to talk about the Bills, where he thinks they're headed, the job done by Brandon Beane in the front office, and the candidacy of Marv Levy for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Joining us now is a Bills Wall of Famer, a Pro Football Hall of Fame Hall of Famer. It is the former GM of the Bills and a couple of other teams by the name of the Carolina Panthers and Indianapolis Colts in the NFL ranks. He is a competition committee veteran. Guy lived on the competition committee, Steve.
Yeah.
It is one Bill Polian joining us here on the show. And, Bill, I know we were talking to you during the break, so we're glad you and your family are well during the pandemic. First things first, one of the main reasons we've got you on the show is one of your former co-workers in a multitude of places, including Montreal, one Marv Levy, Hall of Famer himself, is up for candidacy for the CFL Hall of Fame. And I guess that's coming down next week. Obviously, you spent a good deal of time with him up there. I think you guys won a couple of Grey Cups. What do you feel should put him firmly in the running for Hall of Fame credentials up there north of the border?
Well, first of all, he's my mentor. I mean, he's the guy that created me. There would be no Bill Polian in pro football if it weren't for Marv Levy. But above and beyond that, he went to 3 Grey Cups in 5 years as coach of the Alouettes. Resuscitated a franchise that had been down. And by any measure, people are shocked when we talk about this as GM. I'm amazed he wasn't in the CFL Hall of Fame sooner. Well, he wasn't. And so it's time to rectify that. But I think more important than that, when he came to Buffalo, we began to build a fan base in Canada. And by the time Steve finished playing, 20% of our fan base was from Southern Ontario.
Right.
And when you think of the effect Marv had on those people in Canada and all of the tremendous publicity and positive publicity that he always generated for the Alouettes and for the CFL, he really did more as coach of the Bills to publicize and make the CFL a viable league in people's minds than he really ever did as coach of the Alouettes. So the CFL has benefited all these years because everyone always identifies him as a big success in the CFL. So that to me is reason alone for him to be in. Aside from that stellar record, he's done much more for the CFL than it ever did for him. And it's time for him to be honored for all the great contributions he's made both to that league and to ours.
I've also said this, and I said it when he went in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, and also on the Wall of Fame whenever I get asked about him. And you alluded to it. He was your mentor, and I continue to think about things that I learned from him. And if there's any Hall of Fame that Marv is up for, he should be in. And I said, if there was a Hall of Fame for the human race, Marv would be in the running for that, right? So I agree with you 100%. I mean, his qualifications are, he's a 2-time head coach. Plus, I think not only did he do it here in Buffalo, but also in Montreal. Taking a team from where it was when they took over and to where it got to, that's the real. That's where the rubber meets the road, and his credentials in that arena are impeccable.
Well, not only that, he brings such class to any organization he's associated with. And that's far and away, as Steve, you alluded to it, anyone who he's touched throughout the years in his coaching profession always admires him. Most of us can quote him chapter and verse so much later in our lives because we've never forgotten the lessons that he's taught us. He's by far the greatest teacher I've ever been around. He's affected lives positively wherever he's been. And if that isn't a qualification for the Hall of Fame, I don't know what is.
Certainly a qualification for the Human Hall of Fame. You got to get working on that, Steve.
Yeah, right.
So, Bill, you always refer to him as a mentor, but I'm curious, what do you feel are the pillars of the mentor-mentee relationship that you took from Marv? If there are a couple of high points that, come to the forefront of your brain when you think about the number 1 or 2 things that stick with you from your time with Marv that you feel have benefited you time and again.
It's hard to enumerate them because, as I've always said, and I said in my Hall of Fame acceptance speech, that all of what I know about pro football and most of what I know about life, worth knowing, I learned from Marv Levy. So there's a great deal of it. Having said that, I think the accent on character, that everybody in the organization needs to have the right character and the right set of values, and then his ability to reach people via good example, positive teaching, the positive reinforcement on a continual basis, and his positive outlook on life. There's always tomorrow. Things are going to look better. Keep working at it. Keep grinding. All of those things are part and parcel of who he is and what he made us into. So those would be the high spots.
We had as a guest on the show a few weeks ago, Tony Dungy, who I know that you also have a great deal of respect for and worked with. And I asked him a question I'm going to ask you now. He was a head coach, you were general manager, and also you were general manager for Marv as well. How important is it to have, what kind of relationship is necessary to being a successful GM head coach combination in the National Football League, and has it changed?
No, it hasn't changed one iota. Not since I became the GM in Buffalo in '86 through today. It's still the same process. Winning, as Marv used to say, winning's simple, but it isn't easy. And you have to have good players, and you have to coach them well. The GM has to find the player, and the scouting staff has to find the players, and the coaches have to coach them well. And both the GM and the head coach have to be on the same page. I'll tell you a great story, and every word of this is true. It's almost like I remember it verbatim as though it was yesterday, not however long ago it was, 20 years or so. I was talking with Tony about joining the Colts just after he'd been let go by Tampa Bay. And and we had a long conversation. He said it's around 8 hours. To me, it seemed less, but when you're talking ball, what the heck, right? But anyway, I said to him, take me from day one of training camp through the Super Bowl. How are you going to prepare the team? What do you think the emphasis ought to be, and so forth and so on? Very detailed question. And he began to answer, and about 3 paragraphs in, he stopped and he said, did I say something funny? And I said, no, why? And he said, well, you're smiling and nodding your head. I said, oh, I apologize. I've heard this all before verbatim from Coach Levy. It's exactly the same approach. Right. They're two peas in the same pot.
Yeah.
And so far as I know, and so far as any of us can tell, other than Tony, Marv trying to recruit Tony to play for the Alouettes, is the only connection they've ever had. But they're identical in terms of their approach.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, we're talking with 6-time NFL Executive of the Year, Bill Polian. And Bill, with that in mind, I know a lot of people have already said here in Buffalo that this combination of Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott is probably the closest thing to a general manager and a head coach being in lockstep since you and Marv were running things here in Buffalo. Viewing it from afar, of course, what are the most appealing things that you see about this current combination that Buffalo has working for them?
Well, Brandon's a lot smarter than I was, but other than that, I think that's absolutely correct. First of all, they share a common view of how the team should be built and how it should play and how it should look, and what kind of people they want on the team. They never stray from that blueprint. Sean, I said this after his first year. I didn't want to put a lot of pressure on him, but he reminded me so much of Marv that it was uncanny. His approach to things, the way he outlines things, the way he talks to the press, the way he talks to the team, the way he conducts himself on game day, the way he manages the game on game day. It's all very familiar to me. And in talking with Brandon and getting to know him, their approach is very, very similar to ours, very similar, right down to the kind of people that they want on the team. When I see them make a move, I just nod my head and say, yeah, okay, I understand why they're doing that. Whether it's an acquisition or letting somebody go, it's all a function of staying with the blueprint, which is based entirely on, people of character who want to work hard, who want to win, who believe in team, and who play smart. And that's the kind of football team they have. And if you don't have that alignment of philosophy between the GM and the head coach, it's very hard to succeed.
Well, we've heard also about you've been a part of the competition committee at length and for many years, and have been with different organizations and watched the league, and we've heard you say just in the last couple of minutes how many things are similar today that they were 30 years ago when the Bills were doing their thing in the 90s. What has changed for you? What's the biggest change in the league now? I know it changes a little bit every year, so it more evolves rather than changes. But as you look at it now in 2021, just after a pandemic year, what do you think is the big change now that maybe forges a change and a transformation in the future?
Well, the big change came in '93 with free agency, because it allowed much more player movement than we had in the past. When you came in at 21 or 22, however old you were at the time, you grew up with us.
Right.
The kids were born. We were all one happy family. And when it was time for you to retire, or time for me to leave, or time for Marv to leave, we'd had a relationship that lasted for a long, long time and lasts until this day. That's changed some. The money is obviously much, much greater. And so when it is that large, there is a inordinate focus, or more focus on it than there was in the past. But the interesting thing about it is that the really good teams all look and act and focus on the same things. There is no internal dissension. There's a real relationship between the coaching staff and the players, and in many cases, a real relationship between the front office and the players. The game has changed. We now go 53 and a third yards wide, and the running quarterback, or the moving quarterback, if you will, is much more in vogue than it really was only Elway in your and my day, Steve. But that's the game is always evolving. That's normal. I think it's surprisingly, given the amount of money that's involved in pro football today, it is surprisingly similar to what it was like back in our day. The basics remain the same. You have to be, you can't be dumb and you can't be dirty. You got to play smart. You have to take care of the football. You have to be able to move the ball. You have to play defense above all. The Super Bowl was won. Tom Brady played a nice game, but the Super Bowl was won by the Tampa Bay Bucs defense, right, as it most always is. And so I think what Paul Brown used to call the eternal verities still remain the same. The package it's wrapped in changes, and the amount of money obviously has changed greatly. But I think, at its core, it's still the same game.
Bill, having sat in the general manager's chair for as long as you did with 3 different franchises, I wanted to get your take on this, because if there is one thing from the front office chair that seems to have changed, not to dismiss the fact that you pulled off one of the biggest trades in league history, certainly team history, with the Cornelius Bennett deal, but it just seems like there is a greater propensity to trade significant assets in this league. And obviously we're witnessing that this offseason with quarterback swaps and such. But it just seems like this new wave of general managers is more apt to trade players and the currency by which it moves back and forth across the league just seems to be more prevalent than it was, when you were running football teams. I'm just curious for your take on why you think that is.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it's entirely true when you add it up every year about who moves and who doesn't, as opposed to rumors about movement and trades. In baseball, you have the hot stove league, right? There's nothing to do in the dead of winter than dream up trades. And so a lot of that happens in the NFL. Russell Wilson hasn't moved.
Right.
Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't moved. Deshaun Watson hasn't moved. Those were all the big stories of the offseason. So that's one thing. The second is there's so much more media to talk about these things, and in some cases dream them up. And it seems as though there's always churn. There have always been big trades, and they most typically revolve around high draft choices, because those are the premium picks where you get the players that change franchises and change careers. And so this recent trade with San Francisco is proof of that. Now, we don't know which quarterback they're going to take, but they're going to take one, that's for sure. And that's going to cause a ripple effect either now or at the end of next year. I suspect at the end of next year with Garoppolo going somewhere. So that's a little different, but not much. When you think about the Cornelius Bennett trade, it was a slew of draft choices for the running back, going from the Rams to the Colts, and Greg Bell going to the Rams. By the way, in Indianapolis, I once referred to it in Indianapolis when I was working for the Colts as the Cornelius Bennett trade, and I was immediately corrected by any number of people who said it's the Eric Dickerson trade. I said, "Oh, okay."
It's all which office you're sitting in, I think, right? I mean,
yeah, it sure is. But
that's great.
But I don't think there's always movement with premier draft choices. The one thing that's changed is the tanking. I mean, that didn't exist years ago. In fact, it's only recent, and that's a function of analytics people who I believe incorrectly and without any validity believe that if you accumulate a slew of choices, somehow or other you'll get smart about who you draft. It doesn't work that way, and history shows you that it doesn't. But that's the new trend.
The only reason I brought up that trade conversation, Bill, was because, and these stand out as examples, you used to only see potential franchise quarterbacks change teams at the tail end of their careers, Joe Montana, for example, or on draft weekend. Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, stuff like that, John Elway, things like that. Now you're seeing Matthew Stafford going to one place, Jared Goff going the other. Here's Carson Wentz going to Indy after the relationship deteriorated. I just don't recall off the top of my head too many of those. I'm sure you're probably going to give me about 7 examples of when those happened when you were a GM, but that's why it seemed different to me.
Well, Vince Ferragamo was one. He still had time left on his career and his contract when he came to us. That's when it comes to mind right away. And of course, Joe Ferguson left here when Vince came in. That was a little bit just a little like Goff and Stafford.
And I wanted to ask you this as well as, you were the guy who signed Jim Kelly after he took off and went to the USFL. So you got all kinds of experience dealing with USFL, World Football League, NFL Europe. All of those were very, very different. The CFL, of course, has always been around. What kind of pressure is there for a team, and how important? You saw, the Bills draft Josh Allen and develop him over the course of 3 years, and in this day and age, taking 2 years, and then in your third year getting it, taking 2 years to develop a quarterback seems like infinite patience. Whereas back in the day, you had to wait two years even to sign the guy that you drafted. So give us some insight into your mind about those situations.
You're 100% correct. The only thing that's changed in terms of quarterback development is the impatience of the media and the fans. A quarterback, no matter who he is, whether it's Peyton Manning or Jim Kelly whomever, doesn't matter. John Elway, it doesn't matter. It takes them 3 years in your system to learn how to play the right way, to run a team, to understand how to manipulate a defense, to manage the game, to do all the things that it takes to win in the National Football League. What's changed today? Number one, they're like, and we're seeing it in every draft in the last 4 years, they're NBA one and dones. They're just prospects. They got big arms. That's what Josh was coming in. And it took him 3 years to learn, as it should have. That's what it takes. That hasn't changed. What's changed is the anointing on draft day, the expectations, and then when the guy in his rookie year makes rookie mistakes, whoa, he might be a bust. And then in his second year, when he struggles a little bit for whatever reason, may or may not occur, it's get him out of town. He's not the guy. He's not good enough. And Darnold is a prime example of that. We don't know whether Darnold can play or not. The poor guy's been hurt for a fair amount of time. And then on top of it, he has nobody to play with. He has no talent surrounding him. So we don't know whether he's good, bad, or indifferent. The fact of the matter is that they may sweep him out of town and go in a different direction. That's media anointing in the first instance when it should never happen. And second of all, it's the impatience of the media and the fans for the guy to become Patrick Mahomes overnight. Patrick Mahomes, by the way, sat for 1 full year. 1 full year. So it doesn't change. The landscape hasn't changed. The atmosphere surrounding it has. And I hesitate to do this, but you have to in order to make the point. Poor Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, welcome to Buffalo. You're in heaven, man. You get a chance to be in an offense that fits his skill set, and he gets a chance to learn behind Josh and be coached by a great coaching staff who will know how to use him. It's the ideal place for him. It's a match made in heaven. And he ought to thank his lucky stars that the Bills wanted him. But he had no chance coming to Chicago. Zero chance. He played 13 games in college. How could you expect to put him in a game and allow him to play at a level that was that was even commensurate with professionality in the NFL? It's not possible. They're asking far too much to the guy. And because this is not the correct statistic, but it's in the ballpark. There have been 55 Super Bowls. Over 40 of them have been won by quarterbacks that we would consider Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers. So everybody knowing that says, boy, we got to get one. So now it looks as though the first 4 picks in the draft, certainly 3, maybe 4, will be quarterbacks, and they'll be drafted way higher than they would have in 1986. Just because. Why? Because you need one. That doesn't mean that they're going to succeed. In fact, that this is an accurate statistic. 50% of all first-round quarterbacks fail.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah. But it's part of the reason that Bill's talking about. You don't give the guy enough time. You don't build it around him, and then you say he's a bust, and media pressures you to do that. Last one here for me, Bill, because we only got about a minute left, and we appreciate the time. I wanted to get your take on this one as well. The Bills have proposed a thing to the competition committee. I think it's going before ownership, that in May, presumably, that will ask about enacting a hiring practice for head coaches and any position coaches, for that matter, who would be in line for a promotion with a new team, to not allow interviews until after the championship games, and not allow any hirings of any kind, including head coaches, until after the Super Bowl. Having sat in a GM chair, and when you've had to make a change, wanting to do it probably yesterday, can you see this gaining any kind of traction and telling owners you got to wait till after the Super Bowl to get your new guy in and started?
First of all, I'm 100% in favor of it. It wouldn't hurt a thing but I doubt that it will pass because a change of this type is viewed as competitive, and owners and GMs are so competitive and so jealous of their abilities to go out and find the right guy that I doubt that it'll get the number of votes necessary to pass. But I think it's a great idea. It would be good for the game. It would be good for minority coaches. There's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. You have to put some teeth into it, obviously, which the league office, I'm sure, is not thrilled about. But it's a great idea. With the fact that we're talking about it is a good thing, because over time, people tend to think about it and then say, you know what, that's not a bad idea. And pretty soon it becomes mainstream. So good for Mr. and Mrs. Pagula and the Bills for putting it up there, and hopefully it'll gain some traction.
Bill, thanks so much. Great seeing you, my friend, and hope we'll have you back again sometime.
Always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you. Best to everybody in Buffalo.
All right, Steve, we close this episode of One Bills Lite with our one burning question. Earlier this week, Commissioner Roger Goodell said that teams' off-season programs can begin on April 19th, no bonus week for new head coaches, as had been done in the past. What that will look like, however, still being negotiated between the league and the Players Association. As you know, we had Senior VP of Football Operations Troy Vincent on this podcast last week, and he touched on it. But with the country's vaccination program just starting to ramp up now, the league not mandating that players get vaccinated, the burning question is, what will the offseason program look like for the Bills and the rest of the league?
I think it's going to be dictated by the pace at which they get vaccinated. I think what will happen is the league will come out with a policy that will say something like, if you've got 25 guys, if your coaching staff is vaccinated, which I think they'll probably say, listen, guys.
Most of them are older.
Right. Get vaccinated. So the coaching staff, all of those guys get vaccinated. And then however many players get vaccinated, those guys can work out like free of charge. So let's say, you know, no mask, no all that. They can locker room, all that. So as that number grows, that's what it'll do. And then if you have players who are not vaccinated, they continue to have to do other things to accommodate them. I think they'll have, instead of having groups of 15 guys that are, come in and stay socially distanced, they can stay apart, work out, then leave, and then another 15 come in, they disinfect, and another 15 come in. Instead of that, they'll start to put it into bigger groups, vaccinated group and unvaccinated group. And I think they'll be able to work with those groups as they grow and change and reduce and all of that. So I do think it's going to be different. They're still going to have to consider where they are with the virus, but it's going to be ever changing as the fact that more and more guys will get vaccinated and they'll come along.
Right. I think we also have to still consider the ulterior motive on the part of the Players Association, which is the more virtual, the better. No matter what the status of the pandemic is, they want to be virtual. That much is clear. The vaccination rollout is kind of leaning that argument in their favor to be virtual, but as more and more people get vaccinated, I mean, Steve, I can't imagine after what NFL teams and coaching staffs had to endure in terms of the hurdles to clear just to conduct daily business, to feel like you were prepared for a game, let alone the ramp up to the season. I got to believe coaches are like, are you kidding me? Get the damn vaccination, guys. What are we doing? Like, if we want to actually go into this season guns a-blazing as one unit, we all got to get vaccinated. Can't you see a coach delivering that message?
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think the players union will care at all about vaccination or not. They just don't want to have these guys travel all the way across the country just to go out and sit in a classroom where they can sit in their own place. And that's the argument they'll make. Why do we have to travel to Green Bay, Buffalo, New York, L.A., Chicago, Miami, you name it? Why do we have to go to this? I got a home and a wife and family. The kids are in school. Why do I have to take a trip for 2 weeks to go up and meet when I can do it in my house?
Right.
And that's crazy talk. Now, practices, mini camps, okay, that's different. But why are we doing these meetings? Why would you have to do those in person?
Right.
If you want to, and let's compress this stuff. If you want to, let's not come in for 2 weeks in May, 2 weeks in April, 2 weeks in June, 2 weeks in July. Why are we doing that? Let's come in for, let's wait, come in, and let's do it all at once. Don't chop up my off season.
Yeah, I think there is an element of competition that the Bills specifically have developed here with their Ironman program under Eric Ciano. And we've seen it, Steve. We've walked through the field house pre-COVID and witnessed some of that competition. Tug of war battles.
Yep.
I mean, they break them off into 4 different teams. It's competitive.
It's
the juices are flowing.
And it's good.
It is good. It's very healthy, too. And I think Coach McDermott values that big time. And what coach wouldn't?
Right.
And I wonder if that gets lopped off going forward because of what the Players Association is battling for with this virtual stuff. Because that's phase 1 of the offseason program. That goes away if it's fully virtual. And I don't know where you replicate that again to build the camaraderie that's ingrained in the culture here. And as new players come in and that part disappears, I think it's harder to pull the group together. And eventually, some of those older players on the roster that started that whole thing through that program, there's nobody to replace them that experienced that and built those bonds. And I'm not saying it can't be overcome, but I think it makes the task harder to preserve and continue to grow the culture that's become such a valuable piece of the success of this team's on-field product.
It gives you a later start, no question about it. I mean, you don't get a start in April, May, June, and certainly with the draft picks coming in, they want to start after they're drafted, so it's in May. And coaches have always said when you get new guys like draft picks, rookies, rookie free agents, new players from other teams, you want to get them started. You want to get them acclimated to your verbiage and the language you use in your offense and your defensive calls. And I get all that. But you can do that at the end of the summer rather than the beginning of the summer, then give the guys a month off in between. You just don't need to chop it up. And so in my estimation, the league and the players union are going to hash through that, because the players union has all kinds of leverage. And let me just put it bluntly. The ownership above the coaches and above the players and above all of this, the guys that own the teams and the guys that run the league do not care about the offseason. Virtually. They do not care.
Yeah,
because
it's not impacting their bottom line.
Right. They proved last year they don't need that stuff. So whatever it costs owners to bring these guys in, their head coach can jump up and down all he wants. I'm the one paying the bill. We're going to play football no matter what. So as ready as you can have them, that's as good as it's going to get. So the ownership can say, even to their own head coaches, they're like, listen, I don't have to pay that. You guys had them ready last year, and I didn't have to pay them for 3 weeks of hotels for 150 guys. Why are we doing that? Why are we paying to bring all these guys in? You guys played well last year. Wow. Let's just push it all back and start the season. Because the ownership, the money's coming in no matter what, and nobody's paying to watch practice.
Right. I wonder if, because we I think we firmly believe the offseason program phase 1 is going to be virtual completely. I wonder about OTAs and June minicamp. Do those get compressed together where it's 1 week of OTAs, 3 days of minicamp, and then we'll see you in training camp? I think that could happen, because I have to believe there's going to be some on-field practice sessions that the coaches around the league are going to want back. The question is, how much is ownership going to fight for them to get that from the Players Association when they know in the grand scheme of things it's not really affecting the bottom line other than money out to pay for all the costs that you outlined? I just wonder if there's some form of on-field practice, like maybe in early June. Maybe it's an OTA minicamp combination. It's only 1 week.
Yeah, I get it. June, mid-June, late June, whatever. Training camp usually starts like mid-July.
End of July.
Right, or the end of July. Well, do it right after July 4th holiday. Give them 10 days, and then everybody goes home, ties up their loose ends, and comes right back. Training camp, let's go. Yeah. Why do you have to do it in – and they would in March, April – May, June, you have a week here, a week here, 3 days here.
And then 5 weeks before camp.
I mean, what are you doing? Why, just do it in July and bring them back. And if the players so desire, and here's the problem. and this is a real problem. A place like where we're sitting. I mean, I pulled in today, and weight room's all lit up, and it's gorgeous, right? This facility out here is awesome, and they're upgrading it all the time. And, it's great. Places like Baltimore, the Jets. Some of these places are plush. I mean, they're nice, and it's free. Why wouldn't a guy who, like a Cole Beasley or whatever, whoever, you name it, any player,
undrafted rookie.
Why don't they want to come in and work out here?
Yeah.
Coaches, they get to see the coaches. They get their face in front of the coaching staff.
Look at me working.
They get to know those guys. They can go out on the field and say, they can talk about things. They can do it on their own. They get a private tutoring session from the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. Come on, let's go. That's awesome. And I would have done that. And I did that as a player. When I got to be a Buffalo Bill, I moved here. I never left. I was here all off season. I was in the weight room with the Bills coaches, and some of these guys see the value of that. And let's face it, there is some value in that if you're a guy that's a fringe player.
Right.
All right. That's obvious. Okay. So then what happens when they're doing that, and then the players union says you don't have to? Okay, well, I'm not. I'm going to stay in L.A. and do it. Well, everybody else is at One Bills Drive, working out, doing it. Then it becomes
peer pressure.
It becomes quote unquote voluntary.
Yeah.
Then you got a problem, and that's the gray area that the union.
Well, that's what it
and the
grew
coaches-
into.
That's exactly
until the
right.
pandemic.
That's exactly right. And then the teams were saying, okay, you don't have to come, but we'll give you $10,000 a week cash if you do.
Yeah.
Or $20,000 a week, or
Yeah.
$200,000.
All
at
the
end of
workout
summer.
bonuses in their contracts.
If you're here 90% or 95% of the days we work out in the off season, we
Get
give you
$100,000 for the
$200,000.
off-season, yeah.
So now it's like, okay, well, but if you pay for it, that's different.
Yeah.
That's different. So
It'll be really interesting to see what it looks like.
you can imagine all the little poker chips that each side has to throw into the pot and negotiate with. So there
It
you
will
go.
be very, very
It's gonna be
interesting to
interesting.
see what it looks like going forward. That's all the time we have this week. Please subscribe no matter what podcast platform you use to listen to us. That way you know when the next episode is released. And remember, when there isn't enough time for One Bills Live, there is always enough time for One Bills Lite. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll see you next time, everybody.